Courtney, that was bloody fantastic.
Thank you.
Let me tell you something, Courtney. Something has changed in you. Trust me. In the time you were on the show last year to now, your interaction with the audience, the confidence. I think this has been my favorite performance of you so far.
There's a certain kind of silence that falls over a television studio when something rare happens. Not the polite silence of an audience waiting to clap, but the stunned kind. The kind where 4,000 people forget to breathe at the same time. That's the silence that fell over the America's Got Talent stage in 2018. The night a 13-year-old girl from a small town in northern England opened her mouth and sounded like she'd lived 3 lifetimes already. Her name was Courtney Hadwin, and for a few unforgettable minutes, she made Simon Cowell, a man famous for his icy composure, look genuinely shaken. Cameras caught him leaning back in his chair, as if the sound had physically hit him. It wasn't a reaction of a judge scoring a contestant. It was a reaction of someone who didn't expect to be moved, and was moved anyway. Years later, that moment still circulates online, but so does a much stranger, much sadder story. Whispers, clips, and retrospectives suggest that Simon eventually said something out loud that he'd never said about any other contestant, that the industry had failed her, that they'd pushed her too far, too fast. Whether that specific moment is real or just internet myth, we may never know for certain. But the story underneath it, of a teenager thrown into a machine far bigger than she was ready for, is very real, and it's worth telling properly. Courtney Hadwin was born in July 2004 and grew up in Heselden, a modest former mining village near Hartlepool in County Durham, England. She wasn't raised in a household of music executives or industry connections. She was raised by her parents and grew up alongside her younger siblings in a town where the biggest ambitions were usually quiet ones. But Courtney wasn't quiet for long. She started singing at home as a small child, the way a lot of kids do, humming along to the radio or belting out songs in the shower. What made her different was how quickly that hobby became something else. By the time she was 9 or 10, she was taking it seriously. By 11, she performed at a school open mic that ended up on Facebook, and it spread through her town like wildfire. Classmates who barely noticed her in the hallway were suddenly stunned by the sound coming out of her. From there, things snowballed in the way they do for kids with real talent and stubborn dedication. She buskied in public to save up for proper voice lessons. She competed in regional talent shows. She opened for a major touring act in front of a crowd of thousands before she'd even finished secondary school. Somewhere in the middle of all that, she auditioned for a televised singing competition for kids, made it deep into the competition, and built a small but devoted following. Her family, meanwhile, made sacrifices most people never hear about. Her mother believed in her from the beginning. Her father worked extra jobs just to cover the cost of travel, lessons, and the countless small expenses that come with chasing a dream like this. When Courtney's opportunities eventually crossed the Atlantic, her family restructured their entire lives to follow her there, splitting time between 2 countries so she could keep both her education and her ambitions alive. By early 2018, all of that groundwork led to an invitation nobody in her small town could have predicted: a spot on the biggest stage in American reality television. She walked out looking exactly like what she was: a shy, slightly awkward teenage girl from a place most Americans had never heard of. And then the first notes hit, and the room changed completely. Her voice was raw, gravelly, and impossibly mature for someone her age. She didn't just sing the song. She seemed to become a different person while performing it, moving with a wild, untamed energy that felt like it belonged to a much older, much more seasoned performer. It was a kind of contrast that's almost impossible to manufacture. A quiet kid who transforms into a firestorm the second the music starts. Simon, a man who has built a career on withholding praise, couldn't hide his reaction. He told her on camera that she walked out shy and sung like a completely different person, untamed, ferocious, alive. Another judge hit the golden buzzer, sending her straight through to the live shows, and compared her voice to legends of an entirely different musical era. The clip exploded. Within days, it had been watched by hundreds of millions of people. Commentators called her a once-in-a-generation talent. She advanced through round after round, each performance somehow both more polished and more untamed than the last. When the season finished, she placed 6th, a result that felt almost beside the point. because by then, everyone already knew her name. Shortly after the season wrapped, Simon signed her to his record label. A 13-year-old girl from a mining village had, in the span of a few months, become an internationally recognized name with a major label contract in hand. It looked, from the outside, like the beginning of a fairy tale. Fairy tales rarely survive contact with the actual music industry. At 14, Courtney signed a long-term recording contract, and almost overnight, her life stopped looking like a teenager's life. Interviews, promotional appearances, studio sessions with professional songwriters twice her age, a calendar built entirely around an industry machine designed for adults, a machine that doesn't pause for homework, sleepovers, or the ordinary business of growing up. She's since described feeling like people were constantly telling her who to be, how to sound, how to move, what kind of artist to become, before she'd even had the chance to figure that out for herself. Producers and executives, understandably excited about her potential, began shaping her into a marketable version of herself. Polished, radio-friendly, easy to sell. But the very thing that made her special in the first place, that raw, untrained, unpredictable energy, was exactly what got smoothed over in the process. She was flying between countries, recording songs she didn't always connect with, and being asked to perform under pressure that would exhaust even a seasoned adult artist. And she was doing all of it while still legally a child. Slowly, publicly, she began to pull back. Her social media activity slowed. Her presence in the mainstream press faded. Rumors filled the silence, as they always do when a young public figure suddenly goes quiet. Was she hurt? Was she dropped? Was something wrong? In reality, she wasn't disappearing. She was retreating, trying to find room to breathe inside a career that had grown faster than she had. What followed wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was something quieter and, in its own way, sadder. A slow fading from public view while the industry simply moved on. Talent shows don't wait. New seasons bring new discoveries, new golden buzzers, new headlines. The connection between Courtney and the judges who'd once championed her cooled into something more, like a business relationship that had simply run its course. It's worth being fair here. Nothing in the record suggests Simon Cowell was ever meant to be a personal mentor to her. His role was to discover talent and hand it off to a label, not to manage a teenager's emotional well-being through years of industry pressure. That's simply not how the business works, for better or worse. But that doesn't make the outcome any less difficult for the person living through it. Behind the scenes, Courtney kept writing. She began building relationships with independent producers, most notably Grammy-winning musician Kevin Bowe, known for his work with blues and soul legends. It wasn't glamorous or headline-making. It was the unglamorous, patient work of an artist rebuilding her own foundation after years of being told what to sound like. By the mid-2020s, Courtney reemerged, not as a manufactured pop act, but as an independent artist writing music that actually reflected what she'd been through. Working closely with Kevin Bowe, she released a string of songs exploring vulnerability, resilience, and identity, themes that read less like industry-approved singles and more like a diary set to music. In interviews, she's been candid about just how different this new chapter feels. No more executives dictating her sound. No more deadlines built around someone else's vision of who she should be. She's described this period as something close to a rebirth, finally understanding who she is as an artist instead of being handed an identity by people who barely knew her. Critics and longtime fans responded warmly. Her newer material has been praised as some of the most emotionally honest work of her career, carrying the grit of her original AGT audition, but with the added depth of someone who's actually lived through hardship rather than just performed it. And somewhere along the way, the rumors about Simon Cowell resurfaced, viral clips claiming he'd finally addressed what happened to her, admitting that the industry pushed her too hard, too young. It's a compelling story, and it's completely understandable why it spread. It gives the narrative a tidy emotional bow. But no major outlet has ever verified that this moment actually happened. It remains, as far as anyone can confirm, internet speculation rather than documented fact. What is real, without question, is that Courtney herself has spoken openly about burnout, about losing her sense of self, and about the long road it took to reclaim it. Today, Courtney Hadwin lives a life that looks almost nothing like the whirlwind of 2018, and that seems to be exactly the point. She's based back in the northeast of England, close to the community that raised her, choosing groundedness over the constant churn of the industry machine. She remains active online, but not in the curated, promotional way many young artists are pushed toward. She shares studio clips, casual thoughts, style changes, and honest conversations about mental health with an audience that's grown to well over 1 million people across platforms. Fans consistently describe her presence as refreshingly unpolished, which, given everything she went through trying to fit someone else's polished mold, feels like the most fitting outcome imaginable. She's changed management teams, built a new creative team around her, and been steadily performing again, including a notable appearance at a prestigious New York venue, where she paid tribute to one of her biggest vocal influences in front of major industry figures. She's currently working on her debut full-length album, describing it as genre-fluid and unapologetically hers, unlike anything a label committee would have greenlit for her a few years earlier. Whether or not Simon Cowell ever privately admitted regret about how Courtney's early career was handled, the broader truth doesn't need a viral clip to be valid. The entertainment industry has a long, well-documented history of struggling to protect its youngest talents. It's a demanding, high-pressure world for fully grown adults, let alone a teenager who hadn't even finished secondary school when the cameras first found her. What makes Courtney's story worth telling isn't a rumored breakdown from a famous judge. It's the fact that a girl from a small English village got swept into a massive, fast-moving industry, lost herself for a while inside it, and found her way back out, on her own terms, with her own voice, telling her own story. That's a far more powerful ending than any viral clip could manufacture.